So was it that thumbnail that hooked you in? Yeah, sorry about that. I should explain. This is my 10 most listened to albums video as promised. Um, and people seem to have been interpreting this in different ways, but to me, I want to show my sort of current go-to albums. They may be things that have been pulling off the shelves and playing regularly for years, but they're things that I still play regularly. And this album I haven't played probably in over 40 years, 45 years probably. But if this was a most listened to albums in my collection in my lifetime, this would probably be number one, because when I bought this back in 1978, I had one of those crappy record players that looked like a picnic hamper, with a sapphire needle, and I must have played this every day, 3 or 4 times a day. And actually, it doesn't look in too bad shape considering. I mean, the cover's in good nick. The record's got a few sort of surface marks, but it's not too bad. But no, this doesn't do it for me anymore. And at the age of whatever I was, 9 or 10, I thought this was fantastic. But it wasn't long before I moved on to other stuff. So, yeah, this is not going to be my most listened to ever. Otherwise, there'd be some horror stories in there. These are my go-to albums. These are the ones that when I have one of those moments when I look at these shelves crammed full of records and think, I just can't think what to play, I'll stick on something I know will always deliver. These are albums that sound great. They hit the spot for one reason or another. And yeah, I'll explain as I go along. But this was no joke. This was the other one in my thumbnail. This is a fantastic album. Is it Black Sabbath's best album? Possibly not. Is it my favourite? Definitely not. But it does seem to be the one that I go for whenever I'm in the mood for a bit of Sabbath, which is pretty damn regularly and always has been. It's a Vertigo copy. It's not a swirl. I've got a swirl, but my swirl copy is not in such good shape. It still plays pretty well, but this is it's got the swirl inner sleeve, but it's actually that spaceship label, which is supposedly rarer than the Vertigo swirl label, but just not as desirable. But fantastic album. I mean, don't say any more about that. Then, for something completely different, every now and then I feel like being mellow, and I feel like something that evokes summer. And this album really does that for me. Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain. And this is one of his collaborations with the genius, the arranger, Gil Evans. And this album is spectacular. Put this on, shut your eyes, and you can feel the heat of the sun on your face. You can picture the whitewashed buildings and the sleepy Spanish villages. It's a beautiful, beautiful record. Sounds amazing. The arrangements, like I say, are out of this world. Gil Evans was a genius, and of course Miles Davis's trumpet playing is fantastic. Brilliant album. Then, shortly after I'd got over my love of Greece, the charts were full of bands like XTC, Joe Jackson, Blondie, and these guys, The Police. Regatta de Blanc. Again, is it their best album? It's debatable. Possibly the first album is favoured by a lot of people, but this is the one that had the big hits on, which really did it for me. Message in a Bottle, Walking on the Moon, The Bed's Too Big Without You. It's a superb album. I love the pop punk reggae element of it. Stuart Copeland, of course, fantastic drummer, always one of my favourites. Only thing really that lets the Police down sometimes is Sting's lyrics, which can be a little bit cringeworthy, but brilliant sounding band, amazing musicians. and I was lucky enough to see them when they played Twickenham Stadium a few years back. So that's one off the bucket list. So please, Regatta de Blanc. Oh yeah, and then Wishbone Ash, one of my favourite bands, and again, not many people would cite this as their favourite Wishbone Ash album. This was one that they put out when they're having a bit of time in the United States. I think as tax exiles, or perhaps they were just trying to break big over there. But definitely they were influenced by being in California, being in that sunshine. And this is a real summery album. It's signed. Don't know if you can make that out. Signed by Andy Powell. Met the guy 3 times. And charming bloke, as well as a fantastic guitar player. Laurie Wisefield plays on this album as well. Love his guitar playing. 2 of them together produce a beautiful sound. And I always like this album sleeve, even though it kind of looks like it's put together by somebody cutting pictures out of a magazine and pasting it on. I really love this. Tracks on here. Title track, Front Page News. Not one of the better tracks on there actually, but a decent track. Goodbye Baby, Hello Friend. Surface to Air is a fantastic moody song. 714 is a beautiful instrumental, which is kind of very much in that vein of Jeff Beck when he's doing his fusion type thing. Come In From the Rain, Right or Wrong, Heartbeat, The Day I Found Your Love, Diamond Jack. Every song is a win on here. Love this album. Possibly my favourite Wishbone Ash album, although I'm probably in a minority of one there. Then this is an album I think I've mentioned before. And hardly any surprise that I will have mentioned some of these before if I play them that often. A band that I loved in their early years. Wasn't aware of them in their early years. It's something I discovered later on. But Japan, their first 2 albums are just amazing for me. And this, their second album, is their best as far as I'm concerned. And I play this all the time. And for years I've played this all the time. I just can't get enough of it. So Obscure Alternatives, great moody band shot there. At this point they weren't the kind of glacial synth pop that they became. They're glacial art rock instead. There's a slight glam rock image you can see there, almost like New York Dolls like. The songs have kind of Bowie Berlin era kind of feel to them. Some amazing guitar playing on here. Real post-punk angularity to some of it. It is a very glacial, cold sounding album. And when I'm in the mood for that, which is fairly regularly, this just hits the spot every time. There's that kind of reggae, white boy reggae feel to some of this. Automatic Gun, Rhodesia, Love is Infectious, Deviation, and possibly the 2 best tracks, the last 2, Suburban Berlin, which is gorgeous, and The Tenant, which is a instrumental which is just built around guitar, glacial guitar and saxophone and fretless bass. Absolutely beautiful piece of music. Then again, going back to my early record buying days, one of the first rock bands I really got into, probably the first was the Electric Light Orchestra, who I'm not going to show here. I play them all the time, but there's not one particular album that I go to. I spread my love across the whole catalogue. But one of the other bands that I was drawn to in the sort of late 70s was Queen. Inevitably, there's a lot of glare on that foil sleeve. But The Game, again, not considered one of their best albums. In fact, it's probably the last Queen album I truly loved. I think after that they went too pop for my taste. And this featured the big hit Crazy Little Thing Called Love, which again I'm not crazy about. Never been a fan of 50s style rock and roll, particularly 50s style rock and roll done as a pastiche, he says, after showing the Grease soundtrack. But there are some amazing tracks on here which are really deep cuts. I mean, Play the Game is a great song. Dragon Attack. You've got another one, Bites the Dust, which is John Deacon's kind of love letter to Chic, I suppose. And then you've got Don't Try Suicide, decent little track. And then the beautiful Sail Away Sweet Sister, which is an undiscovered gem by Queen, I think. And it finishes off with the track Save Me, which I bought the single out when it came out and loved it. Still do. And one other great use for this album, apart from it being a really good listen, is coming at the end of the side as it does, Save Me. It's a really good way of testing whether you've set up your cartridge right on your turntable. Believe me, every time I put a new stylus or cartridge on my turntable, that track gets played, because there's such a sort of mass of voices in the chorus. If you haven't set it up right, it just sounds like a mush. If you hit that sweet spot, it'll sound great. So, Queen's the game. Here's a slightly different one. Brant Bjork and his Keep Your Cool album. I could have shown a number of his albums, but this is probably the one I play the most. Brant Bjork, if you don't know, was the drummer in Kyuss, kind of famed stoner rock, desert rock band. And he's had a pretty successful, or prolific at least, solo career. And this album is for me probably, well, certainly the one I play the most. Don't know whether it's the one I like the most, certainly the one I play the most. And in part that's because it's probably the mellowest one of his that I've heard. And because it's kind of stoner rock, this is almost like, how can I describe it? It's like the Cheech and Chong version of J.J. Cale. I don't know whether that makes any sense. It makes sense in my head. It's chilled and unhurried and unfussy rock music, but it's so horizontal. It's amazing. This starts off with Hey Monkey Boy, superb track. I Miss My Chick is another superb song. Title track Keep You Cool. It's all fantastic. Any of his albums is well worth picking up. But this is the one that's just got that kind of, it's almost got a hip hop groove to it, even though it's rock music. It just has that cool as hell kind of laid back feel to it. Love this album. This one I think I've shown before. Hall & Oates, Abandoned Luncheonette. At least I've talked about it. I know I showed their what's the one with Family Man on it, that album. But this is not only my favourite Hall & Oates album, it's the one I play the most. I go to this so often. It just sounds beautiful. It's chilled, it's beautiful, it's soulful. You've got She's Gone on here, which is probably their greatest track. Lady Rain, another classic. When the Morning Comes. Las Vegas Turnaround. Brilliant stuff. I'm Just a Kid, Don't Make Me Feel Like a Man. Every song on here is beautiful. I love this album so much. This one you may have seen previously, the sleeve up on my wall. Uriah Heep, Very Heavy, Very Humble. Again, just a go-to album. Is it their best album? Probably not. Is it my favourite? Probably not. But it opens with Gypsy, which tells you everything you want to know about Uriah Heep. It's that kind of massive Hammond organ drone, the relentless head-banging sort of groove of the thing. On this album, you've got Mick Box's trademarked wah-wah guitar solos. I mean, nobody plays wah-wah guitar like Mick Box, I don't think. I love his playing. I love that album sleeve. This was probably, I think, the first Uriah Heep album I ever heard. Not when it came out, but a school friend of mine had it. He used to sit in his dining room where his dad's turntable was and crank this up, and loved it since then. Never tired of it. And yes, it's got some tracks which some people don't consider particularly good, or not terribly representative of the band. Which one's it? Lucy Blues, which is just a blues track, but it's a really good blues track. And yeah, it doesn't. This was a band looking for its sound on this album, and it kind of had it, but hadn't kind of focused in on it. So you get that blues track on here. You get a cover of Come Away Melinda on here, which I think is fantastic. I didn't know it was a cover when I first heard it. I thought Uriah Heep had written it, and I loved it. But Gypsy, Walking in Your Shadow, Dream Mare, Real Turned On, Wake Up, Set Your Sights, which is it's just gorgeous. You know, prog rock in a way, but proto metal, hard rock, get dismissed as a poor man's Deep Purple. No way. I love Deep Purple, one of my all-time favourite bands, but Uriah Heep were a completely different beast. It's just the hammered organ that was the similarity, really. But yeah, fantastic album. Love it. Gets a regular spin. Played that last night. Then this is the one when I thought about doing this video, which immediately sprang to mind. This is the album that I stick on more than any other album in my collection. And it's Supertramp's Cry on the Century. And not only is it an amazing album by a misunderstood band, because they had some pop hits, so they get dismissed by prog fans. They're too sort of beardy and long-haired for pop fans. But this is a prog album through and through. It has the pop track Dreamer. But God, nobody did intelligent art rock pop like Supertramp. And when they did prog, they were amazing. And on this album, they're amazing. And this is an amazing pressing of this album. And it's one of these half-speed mastered audiophile editions. And it sounds utterly stunning. So yeah, that gets a play every couple of weeks minimum, I would say. Favourite Supertramp album, one of my favourite albums of all time, and my favourite pressing of this album. Amazing stuff. So that's my 10. But I've got a couple of honourable mentions. But I'm in the mood for some 80s glossy commercial rock. The Outfield, Play Deep. Brilliant album. Owned this album since it came out, pretty much. And I never tire of it. And sometimes I do want some. It's just really overproduced 80s music. And this is it. It's fantastic. I always considered them a bit of an AOR band, but the more I listened to it, the more I realised they were kind of like a cross between the Police, AOR, and U2, if U2 weren't, po-faced preachers. This is a great album. I mean, the track that first hooked me in was Your Love, which is a massive, massive song. But Say It Isn't So, 61 Seconds, All the Love in the World. Brilliant. An amazing album. And my final honourable mention, Santana, the third album. Again, I've been playing this one for donkey's years. It's still my go-to Santana album. And I can't fault it. I love the first two albums. But for me, this is the best. Again, it's the first one I ever heard by Santana. And I've never tired of it. Carlos Santana's guitar playing is incredible. There's elements of psychedelia still on here in his guitar playing. You've got that Afro-Cuban rhythm section, which just makes the whole thing just so exciting. And Michael Shreve, this young baby-faced boy on drums who took Woodstock by storm and just plays like a demon on this album. Absolutely incredible. So yeah, Santana 3. So that's it. My top 10, 12 go-to albums. Like I say, there's other albums which I prefer to these. These aren't necessarily my favourite albums by these bands, but good God, they do bring something to the party.